In the year 1991, the future was looking pretty bright for a young game designer, well, not that young as game designers go, he was 31, named Will Wright. Back in 1984, he had created a top-down shooter game for the Commodore 64 called Raid on Bungling Bay that had been a surprise success, giving him the opportunity to take his time developing a follow-up to create something truly special. Raid on Bungling Bay had been noteworthy for including strategy elements that were uncommon in action games at the time. For instance, depending on which specific buildings the player destroyed in early missions, and the order in which they were destroyed, the enemy's ability to produce new units would change, and later missions would become easier or harder. Wright had never been a particular fan of shooters, and the unusually cerebral design of his breakout hit reflected his distaste for straightforward action gameplay. He would later admit that he had a lot more fun tinkering with the level editing program he used to make Raid on Bungling Bay than he did playing the actual game. And in a twist that will probably surprise no one, he ended up spending a lot of time with that level editor even after the finished product was published and he was theoretically supposed to be moving on to something new. Not that his time with the level editor was wasted. Far from it. Because his next project, which would go on to be an even greater success and establish him as a household name in computer gaming, was essentially a playable level editor, the original SimCity, released in 1989. This was far from the first simulation game to be a major commercial success. In fact, simulation games had been a staple of computer game libraries since the early 1980s. One particularly popular example of the genre, the Oregon Trail, had been available for home computers since 1978. But what made SimCity unique was how much more it felt like a game than its predecessors. Previous simulation games were all numbers and tables and long paragraphs of text. They had more in common with tabletop war games than something like Super Mario Bros. But SimCity was far more dynamic and responsive. You were in control of a little virtual city that grew under your watchful gaze, with your results depending not only on intelligent decision-making, but also the ability to weigh different priorities wisely and keep track of everything you'd already created. All of this in real time. It had a tension and a feeling of precariousness that had rarely been seen in any kind of strategy game before. Will Wright had found his niche. For the rest of his career, he would be famous primarily for the SimCity series and its spin-offs, but also as an innovative designer who could make an exciting simulation out of just about anything. Only 2 years after the release of SimCity, he had already proved how wildly experimental he could get with 2 follow-up games, Sim Earth, in which the player controls the development of an entire planet, a concept he would later revisit with Spore, and Sim Ant, which puts players into the shoes of an ant and tasks them with leading the colony to prosperity. But in the last few months of 1991, Wright would receive a sudden inspiration that would eventually drive him to create the most successful game of his entire career, a game that would, to some extent, redefine the whole idea of what games are for, who would want to play them, and how players feel about them. And that inspiration was that his house burned down. I'm serious. Wright was living in Oakland, California, when the infamous Oakland Hills firestorm broke out in late October 1991, just a few blocks away from his house. As he tells it, he woke up on that day smelling smoke, then started to shave and take a shower, but within minutes was so disturbed by the quantity of smoke outside that he got into his car with his wife and 2 neighbors, who were temporarily missing their own car, and started driving away. Apparently they could see the flames on either side of them as they passed through a neighborhood on the way out of town. When he returned a week later, there was nothing left of his house except some charred debris. Every living thing that had stayed on that hillside had been destroyed too, except for some ants, which he noticed crawling around the wreckage. Since ants live underground, they're often able to survive wildfires. Curiously enough, the source code for SimAnt had just been finished a few weeks before, and he had kept it at his home. A slight change in the timeline of events, and that game could have been incinerated along with everything else in his house, except for a few paintings which he'd packed into his car before taking off. Just as a minor element of Raid on Bungling Bay turned into the basis for SimCity, the premise of SimAnt, and the sudden loss of all of his possessions, combined to channel his thoughts in an entirely novel direction, one that wouldn't be fully realized until years later, but which started to nag at him right away. As he started construction on a new house, he thought about how we develop sentimental feelings about the places where we live and are afraid to lose them, unlike ants, who don't care where they live, and just keep digging out more space to live in, no matter how much or how little they already have. As he bought new furniture and appliances and electronics and decorations for the new house, he asked himself, do I really need any of this stuff? Why do we like stuff so much to begin with? Ants don't have stuff, and they seem pretty happy. What makes humans so different from every other species on Earth? These are some pretty heavy questions. not the kind of thing most people turn to video games to find answers for, especially when virtual stuff is such a powerful hook to get people invested in a video game. If real stuff doesn't actually matter that much, and we can be happy without it, how much more does that apply to virtual stuff, which is literally just an image or even an idea that we could theoretically make for ourselves out of absolutely nothing? I find it quite ironic that an experience which deprived Will Wright of all his stuff, and which made him question why anybody buys stuff to begin with, drove him to the creation of a game which is arguably one of the most creative, lavish, and loving homages to consumerism that has ever existed: The Sims, originally released for Windows in the year 2000. The Sims is not a game that discourages you from owning things, whether real or virtual. It's practically an ode to the pleasures of having and using your household possessions. Yes, the most challenging and interactive part of the game is having your sim interact with other sims on a personal level, building relationships and forming bonds and, well, becoming a better person. I mean literally. The game has quantifiable skill points, and if you play it all seriously, your sim gets objectively better at being a person as time goes on. But where do you do all this self-improvement? In your house, which you have to build and paint and maintain and put stuff in. How do you build those skills that are so important to your career and relationships? You have to use stuff. And not only that, but fancier and more expensive stuff builds your skills better. In a lot of ways, The Sims is a game about using stuff to increase your earning potential so you can make more money, get better stuff, use the better stuff to make even more money, and so on until you literally run out of expensive stuff to buy. In that sense, it has a lot in common with Animal Crossing, a game which is ostensibly quite low-key and relaxing, but which often turns into a race to get the biggest house and the coolest furniture and decorations as soon as possible. We play games like this to get away from the rat race of constant competition and high scores, and then a lot of us end up turning that hobby into a rat race because the truth is that deep down we really like competition and high scores. One thing that ants and human beings actually have in common is that we're both relentlessly acquisitive and not inclined to sit back and just enjoy what we already have. There's sugar sitting out on that kitchen counter, and I'll be damned if I'm not skittering over there to pick some of it up. It's practically begging me to. If anything, I would say that Animal Crossing is like the less challenging and lower stakes version of The Sims, a life simulation where you can talk to your neighbors and collect paintings and catch fish, but you can't accidentally pee your pants in front of a woman you've been dating for months, or have your dog run away because you keep forgetting to feed it, or burn your house down because you don't know how to cook, all of which are things that can happen in The Sims. But besides challenge, The Sims has one other thing that Animal Crossing hasn't got. And that finally brings us back to what this series is supposed to be about: flavor text. You see, for a guy who supposedly doesn't care much about stuff, Will Wright certainly went above and beyond to make virtual shopping interesting in The Sims. One of the game's 3 main modes, Buy Mode, is dedicated entirely to the act of reading about various domestic products, purchasing them, and placing them in your house. And another one, Build Mode, is used to construct your house and install things like doors and windows, plumbing fixtures, wallpaper, and landscaping. Both of these features are laid out like a virtual catalog, with extensive flavor text for every single item. Yes, even stuff like staircases and trees. There's more flavor text in this game than there was any kind of text in most games at the time. And Buy Mode in particular, thanks to the work of writer Sean Beatty, has some of the wittiest item descriptions I've ever run across in fiction, complemented by a soundtrack that intentionally resembles the kind of muzak you'd hear in grocery stores or shopping malls during the middle of the 20th century. Much better, though, in my opinion. In fact, if you wanted to pick a single phrase to sum up the atmosphere of the original Sims, mid-century modern would be an excellent choice. There was a huge revival of interest in retro furniture, clothing, and general design aesthetics during the 1990s, and The Sims revels in that revival. Generally speaking, items in the game are considered better the more outlandish, overstuffed, or made of plastic they are. If something is really fancy, it'll be made in Europe and cost $3,000, or a super high-tech appliance where everything, including the dials, is made using solid-state superconductor technology. And if you think all this breathless consumerism is a little bit over the top, trust me, you're meant to. Beatty's descriptions are very obviously tongue-in-cheek and poke fun at a lot of well-worn advertising tropes, as well as classic American obsessions like impressing the neighbors, using appliances to avoid tedious household chores, and trying to turn everything into a hobby. I could talk all day about how clever the flavor text in Buy Mode is, but a much faster and more pleasant way to convince you would be to just read some of it. So here, in no particular order, are 20 of my favorite item descriptions from The Sims. I know 20 seems like a lot, but believe me, this still barely scratches the surface. This game is a goldmine. Also, it gives me an excuse to wear this outfit again. Remember that video? Stonks, am I right? Anyway. Werkbunst all-purpose chair. Chairs are a great invention. They let you sit down while eating, make typing possible while using the computer, and are great for sitting on while watching TV. This minimal, serious, cantilever design provides seriously minimal comfort. Indoor-outdoor love seat. Made from a space-age PVC and silicone hybrid, this sofa provides year-round comfort both in front of the TV or out by the pool. The baked-on plastic finish mimics antique vinyls and is impervious to chipping, peeling, cracking, rust, and chemical or atomic attack. Contempto couch. Softness and coziness. Expression and impression. This dynamically striped couch creates a statement both in form and in function that says, "My couch." Brings comfort that lasts as long as the endless harmony of the beautiful homestead. Nylon shell, foam cushions, durable plastic legs. Color, nicotine. Pinstripe sofa from ZecuTime. ZecuTime is focused on Sims building healthy comfort levels through the ownership of upscale and corporate full-service sofas located in major living rooms, family rooms, and dens. Sofa acquisition and investment management strategies have been developed with the benefit of the proprietary couch research of the ZecuTime Comfort Research Group. Cheap Ease Double Sleeper. Finding a good bed when you're on a budget is tough. So is sleeping on the floor. A good compromise is the Cheap Ease Double Sleeper. Satisfy your Sim's basic sleep and energy needs while you dream about better, more comfortable beds. 100% authentic chipboard. Numica Folding Card Table. Is it really a card table? Or a breakfast table? A computer stand? A poolside picnic table? Who knows? There are just about as many uses for a Numica folding table as there are things to put on it. Plastic-covered chipboard has simulated Formica pattern for that retro look without the vintage price tag. Okay, I just want to stop here for a moment and point out that this hits very close to home for me, because I do use folding card tables as part of my home decor, and it really does feel as silly as this makes it sound. Another thing I love about this is the idea that you could charge big bucks for an antique folding card table, and the fact that the game is constantly talking about using all of this stuff by the pool. Also, the phrase simulated Formica will never not be hilarious to me. Anyway, moving on. Colonial Legacy Dining Table. Hardy proportions meet classic details in this solid oak compromise. Legs are machine-turned by hand from an original neo-colonial pattern. Surfaces are treated with lysopol, chloroform, tannic acid, and potassium permanganate, and then finished with urethane to preserve the natural luster and feeling of the wood. Pink Flamingo. Are you bothered by nuisance tropical flamingos soiling your front yard? Or does your lot just need some decoration? Either way, you can't go wrong with a pink flamingo decoy. The high-gloss finish and metal legs act as a deterrent to real flamingos, while simultaneously advertising the lighthearted and fun-loving spirit of the homeowner. Watercolor by JME. Art student painting. Help spread the gift of art by purchasing and displaying this floral triptych. There's always the chance the artist may be famous someday as well. Mounted on acid-free cardboard. Poseidon's Adventure Aquarium. Aquariums are lots of fun. Well, at least for some people. Just don't forget to feed the fish and clean the tank periodically, and they will swim happily in circles forever. Scylla and Charybdis. Sculpture isn't just what you back into when looking at paintings. Sculpture turns your room into an experience. Inspired by Greek mythology and contemporary sci-fi, this blue ribbon quality piece challenges the viewer to overcome their habitual and culturally imposed ideas of taste and value. All proceeds benefit the Grey Llamas Art Society. Firebrand Smoke Detector. No responsible sim should be without a smoke alarm. The cheap price and speedy SimCity Fire Department response are all the insurance you'll need. Highly recommended for stubborn sims who can't cook but insist on using stoves. The advanced 360-degree photoelectric detection pattern detects fires instantly in same room. Zymance Component Hi-Fi Stereo. Who says the days of the vinyl LP are dead? Even the major media outlets now report that analog LPs sound warmer, or that they have more soul than the crisp and antiseptic sound of CD systems. Solid state, hand-tuned, vacuum tube electronics, modern triode amplification, simulated plastic wood resistant to scratching, tagging, and wraps. Wow. It's funny to think this item description literally predicted the vinyl revival of the late 2000s. I thought this was The Sims, not The Simpsons. There's my crappy pun out of the way for this episode. Anyway. See Me, Feel Me Pinball Machine. Not every sim is a pinball wizard, but they would have to be deaf, dumb, and blind not to love playing on the See Me, Feel Me pinball table. Chrome-plated steel balls bounce off rubber-coated electric bumpers in a cacophony of movement, noise, flashing lights, and the ever-elusive high score. By who? By Tommy Co., of course. By the way, if you don't get why this description is funny, congratulations, you are not a boomer. Strings Theory Stereo. The product of a joint venture between the Sim Institute of Techiness and the Landgrab Corporation, the Strings Theory stereo system utilizes an entropy logarithm to produce mass excitations of an audio data string particle with 0 mass and 2 units of DJ spin. Supersymmetry of phonic bubbles produces music superior to live performances. Positive Potential Microwave. Taking advantage of trickle-down technology from SimCity defense contractors, the Positive Potential harnesses non-ionizing radiation in a magnetron tube to enable half-wave voltage octupling, reduces cooking time from minutes to seconds. Variable speed rotating antenna prevents ignition of exterior surfaces. Free glowing reviews cookbook with purchase. So for those of you who don't know, this is actually quite similar to how the microwave was really invented. The first one was made by Raytheon, a defense contractor, after an employee noticed that a microwave emitter they were working with had melted a candy bar in his pocket. Also, fun fact, there were thousands of microwave cookbooks back in the 1980s, and every single one is at least a little bit cringy. Lamarck Refrigerator. The Lamarck cools perishables at temperatures ranging from medium to coolest. Patented gas technology produces only minimal carbon monoxide emissions. Comes with shelves, drawers, door, and a little inside light that goes on and off. Hygiea-O-Matic Toilet. Based on ancient Greek and Victorian engineering principles such as gravity and water seal technology, the toilet has become a staple of modern hygiene and efficiency. Waste is drained away and the water trap effectively stops odors from backing up into the room. Ingenious flipping seat and flush handle make using the Hygiea-O-Matic a blast. Flush Force 5 XLT. If ever there were a toilet that would contribute better to satisfying the Sims' bladder motives, this would be it. Don't ask why, don't ask how. It's just cool looking and has more buttons than a stealth bomber. Complete with 8-hour emergency battery pack, heated seat, and 56K modem. It's even equipped with auto-flush technology. You know, mark my words, pretty soon they are going to start trying to connect toilets to the internet, and it's going to be hilarious seeing them try to come up with a reason for it, other than our obsessive need to computerize everything. Okay, so finally we have Will Wright Dollhouse. This marvel of dollhouse design is meant for everyone, allowing children as well as adults to act out fantasies of controlling little families. This incredible replica comes complete with amazingly realistic furniture and decorative items. Don't be surprised if hours upon hours are spent enjoying this little world. And there's your back-of-the-box blurb for this entire game, summed up in a single piece of optional flavor text. Stuff like this is what makes me such an enthusiast of this particular aspect of gaming. The idea of playing The Sims and buying this dollhouse for your Sims, then watching as they play with little imaginary people inside your simulation of little imaginary people is just magical. I don't know if The Sims is the kind of game that could keep you spellbound for hours upon hours, but it certainly did for me back in the early 2000s, and the wit and personality of the game's narration was always one of my favorite things about it. That and the fact that you could build your own pool. But I'll save that discussion for when I do a 12-part series about pools in video games. What I do think is that you owe it to yourself to at least try The Sims out for an hour or two. And if the core gameplay loop doesn't hook you, spend that time reading the descriptions in buy mode. Just like window shopping, it's free. Oh, and one last tip from the old Noirster. If you do find yourself in a bit of a cash crunch and you really want that sad clown painting, hold down Control and Shift on your keyboard, then press C, and when a window pops up, type in the word Rosebud and press Enter. Have fun! Oh, and by the way, if anybody wants me to do a similar greatest hits thing with the build mode stuff, just leave a comment and let me know. I'd love to do it. See you next file.